So in the last recording that I did on my walk, I realized finally the purpose of my little dog, Faith. It was confirmation. She had literally no other purpose. She died from drinking the pond water out in the area. The other dogs drank it too, but she had a 1 in a million condition. Only 1,000,000 dogs. Out of 1,000,000 dogs, only one of them died from IMHA, which was triggered by springtime allergies, and it was from drinking from that pond. It was the only thing that was different that year. Otherwise, she was inside like she always was all the time. But we went out into this pond, and she drank from it, and 2 weeks later, she was gone. It was terrible. And I hated that pond. I hated it, and it's so sad because it was such a beautiful pond, too. It's so hard to hate something that is so visually beautiful. And the other two dogs were fine. That's the other thing too. It was almost kind of like it was very personal, like it just targeted me, like how dare you try to have a beautiful moment and take your dog on a walk. Now here's the thing. I could have taken her on a walk any other time those first 8 years I was out there. I took her on a walk. And she passed just 3 weeks before Jenna, meaning her and Jenna went at the same time so that it was just me and Toby left. The 8 years I was out there, the one time I take her on a walk out there with the rest of them is just a month away before Jenna passing away. What are the odds of that? I know, but every time I look at that pond, I hated it. It reminded me of death. And then when I'd go on walks, my neighbor down the road was cutting down all the trees. So now when I'd go on walks, I'd have to see that pond. I had to be reminded of that pond, even on walks now. It's like I couldn't go on a walk with Toby without being reminded of my little dog Faith passing away from being sick from that water. And it was terrible. I was forced to just look at that pond for at least 2 years. And then something really strange happened. I came out here, and I was looking around in a Goodwill, and there's this giant, beautiful painting of a pond that reminds me a lot of my pond. Now, some of it's off. In the painting, there's mountains, but in my version, in reality, there's hills, not mountains. And, the path isn't as wide as it is in the painting. But it reminded me of the pond, big time. And I just looked at it. I was like, and it's huge, too. It's like 53 inches wide by, I don't know. It's a very big painting. And it was only $40, and it's very pretty. Matched the color theme of the house, the way I'm decorating it. And it reminded me of the pond. I thought, I have to get this. I've not seen anything like this in a Goodwill before. I have to get it. If I don't get it now, someone will get it soon. It's gorgeous. And it reminds me of the pond. But then I thought, do I really want to stare at a picture again that reminded me of my small dog passing? But listen to this, because I finally unraveled the mystery of the purpose of Faith, my little dog Faith. Just about a month and a half before Toby passed, I asked God that Toby could at least see the beginning of the next chapter of my life. I didn't want him to pass in the last chapter and then I have to start the new chapter with that. I wanted him there with me in the beginning. And so one thing led to another. His health began to go down very rapidly. Nobody could have seen it coming. He spent the last 2 days of his life in Kansas, and we weren't meant to be in Kansas. We were actually driving to California on the 40, but because of issues with the car, and then my dad saying, no, don't bother coming here, we ended up having to try to figure out where we're going to go. And so we knew people in Kansas, so we went to Kansas instead. And in my mind, Toby still had maybe a month, 2 weeks to a month maybe, from what the last dog vet visit showed me. And I didn't know, I thought we were just going to stop in Kansas and keep going, or I didn't know what we were going to do. But we ended up in Kansas. Toby was only in Kansas for like 2 days before he passed. And for some, they would say, well, there it is. For me, it was just like not a coincidence, but we were just stopped there and he just passed. I didn't see it as the beginning of the next chapter like I was supposed to be in Kansas. And then a lot of other really weird things happened. We were out here, I was looking into where I'm going to live, rent apartments, but I didn't know my credit was so bad I couldn't get an apartment anywhere really in the country. I would have had to go back to Kentucky. We were me and my sister, we were looking through houses out here, and a lot of them were just not good deals. They were not in very good areas, very unsafe areas. And sure enough, there was one house that was not on the market that about the same time my sister got it in her mind to start looking for a house to buy, the seller, one of the people we stayed with for about 5 days, got it in his mind to sell one of his houses, one of his rentals. At about the same time he was thinking about selling the house, my sister was thinking about buying the house. And my sister's husband, when his dad passed, his dad had a $100,000 fund that's meant to go to a house for him to put towards a house. And so there was a lot of stuff that went on there. But when we came out here, he said, yeah, I'm selling a house. And we went, and the moment I stepped in this house, I felt it. It was overwhelming. Like, this is where I am supposed to be. All of the other places I went to, all the other apartments, it felt cold. I felt homesick. It felt cold. It felt wrong. But when I stepped into this house, I was overwhelmed with emotion because I felt like God was telling me through feeling, not through audible words, that I'm giving you this house. This is where you're meant to live. And it was overwhelming because the alternative was I have to go back to the trailer where I had the dogs, but now no dogs, out in the middle of nowhere by myself, contemplating offing myself with no reason to stay. Death, basically. Or out here, a new life. And so more things happened. The seller went back on his original. He said he would sell it to us for $100, but now he raised the price. And so then they were scrambling to find a way to make it happen. And John's mom, John is my brother-in-law, just came in to save. His mom just saved the day. They bought the house. They bought it. They made it happen. So there were all kinds of these strange coincidences of the timing of him just deciding to sell a house. At the same time, Rachel decided, hey, we should buy a house. At the same time, I need somewhere to stay that's not Kentucky. While they were in the country, because they're only in the country like once every other couple years or so. I mean, the timing of all of it, and Toby passing in the same time, and all of it just converged on one point in the country, in the world, in the universe. So there's all those coincidences, but the skeptic in me is still like, but, this is... We could have stopped anywhere and all this stuff, but then it dawned on me on the walk today. The original plan, my plan, man-made plan, not God's plan, my plan was when I adopted Faith, because she was about 6 years younger than Toby and Jenna, I thought this will be the dog that will be with me after Toby and Jenna passes away, so it won't be so hard dealing with their loss, because I figured they're both about the same age, they'll go about the same time. But I thought, well, Faith is 6 years younger, and she's a small dog, so she's probably going to last a lot longer. She'll be with me after Toby and Jenna pass. That was the plan. That was my plan. Sounds great, right? If Faith had not passed away, and she was still with me, the last 3 years with Toby, I would have not taken him everywhere. That whole time would have been different. I would have not become the person that I became. And I would have stayed in Kentucky after Toby passed. And I would have stayed out there as long as she was alive. And I would not be here in Kansas. I would have no idea where I'm going to go. And Faith was the kind of dog that you couldn't take her anywhere. She got motion sickness within minutes. She'd throw up in a car ride. She was not a very social dog. She was just meant to stay in the house and keep you company. You couldn't take her anywhere. So those years with her would have been just me staying in the house, going nowhere, because I would have felt bad about leaving her anywhere if she was still here. She was the giant clue and confirmation I was meant to be in Kansas. Because she passed from the pond at 9 years old, rather than continuing to live, I was meant to be in Kansas. I look at this pond now, not as a symbol of death, but rather change. I look at this pond as a symbol that even though something that seems terrible, and that happened almost 4 years ago, it seems terrible. Now, I don't even know what's going to happen while I'm out here in Kansas, but I do have this funny feeling that good things are going to happen. Better than my time in Kentucky, which is easy to best, you know. It was not a great time out there. Nothing happened out there. I had, a couple acquaintances that were, I'd consider them friends, but no deep friendships, no relationships, no future, nothing out there. I was just waiting, getting older and waiting to die out there. There was nothing out there for me. It was like the wilderness. Okay, out here, I feel like there's a lot of life out here, and I think that good things are going to happen. I'm going to look at this pond, and I have to remind myself that although it is a symbol of my small dog passing when she was only 9 years old, it's also a symbol that God has a plan. He has a plan. And I'm really starting to believe that now. I would have never met my dogs if my mom had not passed away when I was 21. Now, someone out there is going to say, you would trade your mom's life for having never met your 3 dogs? I don't have to answer that question because God answered that question. And God said, yes, it's best. And my sister probably wouldn't be married to who she's married to right now and wouldn't have her kids if my mom was alive. There's no guarantee of that. I just have this funny feeling that such a big and impactful thing could have actually changed events they may have never met. I would have never met my dogs, and they were monumental in developing who I am. My mom passed, just like my little dog passed, at 9 years old to the pond. And that's young for a dog, 9. Well, my mom passed when she was 44. That's young for a person. I know. I'm 41. Okay, so if 44 is young, I'm still young, okay, right? I'm joking here for those of you who don't know. Not super funny, but mildly funny. Cute funny. Yeah, my mom was young at 44. I say that because I'm 41. But yeah, 44 is a young age for a person to pass, but she did. And it was hard for years. I was lost for years. Those were my darkest years. Those first 2 years after Mom passed, I was lost. I was so lost. I had never experienced a loss like that in my life. I was an agnostic for almost 8 or 9 years. I always rounded up to a decade, to 10 years, but it was closer to probably 8 or 9. Because of that loss, I began to study everything. I just began to become frustrated. I had my doubts. I went through at least 8 years of agnosticism because of my mom's loss. And let me tell you something, that was also meant to happen. I was going to actually write a book called Why God Wanted Me to Be an Atheist. Because I thought the title just sounds cool. Or at the very least, make it a chapter, But it's true. I needed to see the world from the eyes of somebody who has no hope, no faith, nothing. To see how awful and ugly it is. Because that's the audience I was meant to speak to. And so my mom passing was actually responsible for me having real faith, and I think also responsible in the future for helping other people have faith. Because I had to go through that agnostic season. That time of doubt. That formed who I was. One person had to pass earlier rather than later so that many could live. My little dog had to pass so that many could live. My little dog and my mom both went at a young age, but it was for a reason. It was for a reason. I don't have the time and energy in the day to go through every single person's life and try to analyze what the reason for this and purpose was. One thing that is a kind of a gut feeling is that for people who live with Jesus as Father, as their God, when they live in His purpose, these things have purpose. The deaths they have in their life have a purpose. But I can't answer if whether or not somebody who is living outside of God's will, if the things that happen in their life have purpose or not. My gut instinct is they don't. Which is ironic because then when an atheist says when bad things happen, there's no reason for it. It just happens. Like, they're right. for them. And when they say, well, they're wrong about judgment afterwards. They think they're not going to face it, but when they realize there's a much greater mind behind existence than they ever imagined, whoopsie. They think that all of existence, which is infinitely more complex than a human brain, is somehow less conscious than a human brain, rather than assuming that it's more conscious. That's amazing. But anyway, my little dog passing at a young age had a purpose. I have to just keep saying it until it's ingrained in my head. If she did not pass and she had a long life like I wanted at that time, I would still be in Kentucky after Toby passed. I would have not spent the years with Toby, his last years with him exclusively in such a meaningful way. I would not have spent those years with him. Everything would be different, and I would not be out here, and I would not have a future. So it's almost as if God made a call while crafting this path, that for the lives of many, that it was for the best that my mom passed when I was 21, and that my little dog passed when she was 9. From God's perspective, death is not tragic in any way at all. It's like going from one room to another. Though He has empathy, so He understands how hard it is for us who live in only one room. We're like in a giant waiting room, and people just get called in through the door, and we don't know what's down the hall and in the other room. Like, we don't see it. We just hear rumors of it. And some people say, oh yeah, I stuck my, like the near-death people, I stuck my head down the hallway and then I came back and guess what I saw, guys? Guess what I saw? So we're just in this room, and it's hard for us because we don't know what's in the other. We don't know what's anything beyond this room. And so God has empathy and understands that difficulty. I think this is one of the reasons why He allowed me to see glimpses of heaven. Just to know my dogs are okay, my mom's okay. Chill out, don't worry. They're in a safe place. They're loved. The hard part is going through life without their presence in my life anymore. That's the hard part. They brought so much joy. And I know, like from past lessons learned, I have to wait. I have to wait, and I have to put myself out there. I isolate. That's just one. I'm very antisocial like that. I isolate. That's why I preferred living in the forest for 11 years, just with me and the dogs. I'm a hermit. I isolate big time. And so I have got to get out of my comfort zone on a regular basis and just be around people, be vulnerable, and just get out. I have to. And now that I'm near a city, I have no excuse. I'm like 10 minutes away from everything. I used to be 30 minutes away from something. But now I'm only 10 minutes away from everything. I've got no excuse. But back to the subject. I'm looking at this picture as I'm doing this recording too. And I don't look at this picture anymore with disgust. I look at it as providence. Providence. And a reminder constantly that heaven is all that matters. And I said a little bit of it earlier. Storing treasure in heaven is our top priority here. This is not something that you will hear many churches talk about. And that's awful because Jesus talked about storing treasure in heaven. And so I want to talk about that more. Treasure is something valuable. Treasure in heaven is something valuable to God. Let me say it again. Treasure is something valuable, and treasure in heaven is something valuable to God. What's valuable to God? This is where I cringe if I hear religious people talk about it. Mindless conversions are treasure to God. Or let me tell you something. It's actually more than you might think. There was, I want to talk about one of my favorite memories. Okay. Probably my favorite memory, actually. I always say it's one of them. No, I think it is my favorite memory. This was almost 4 years after my mom had passed away. And I was going through a very lost time for years. My first offing myself attempt was during this time, and I was lost. I was agnostic. I had no belief in anything. I was just lost. Sorry, I'm going to get emotional because of how beautiful it is. My dad remarried since my mom passed, and my stepmom found this little puppy. He was about 3 months old, and they asked me if I wanted him. And I said, sure. Not knowing I radically changed my life by just saying sure. And it was funny because I went out and fed him and came back inside, and then they asked me, says, no, Daniel, did you want a dog? And I was like, well, I never really thought about it. And I said, does he make a lot of noise? Does he bark a lot? And she goes, oh, no. And right when she said that, he started barking because he's like, hey, where'd that guy go with the food? But the funny thing is she was right. Toby was one of the quietest dogs I've ever known. He only barked like it feels like a dozen times in his life. And it was always for something valid, like a truck charging over the yard or something like that, Yeah, that's a Kentucky memory I'll talk about later. But anyway, so I took Toby into my life. He was 3 months old. And I was so connected to him early on. Sorry, I'm gonna let it out. Okay, I'm not gonna try to hold it. He helped heal me in a way that no medicine could after losing my mom. And it was beautiful. I love that dog so soon, so fast. I didn't feel lonely anymore. And when it was just him and me still, it was before I got Jenna, it was just him and me, I always took him out somewhere to throw the ball. One time I went to MLK High School. It's in Riverside, California. This was before they had all the big stadiums, and it used to be just a field, and there were still orange groves there too, before there were houses. It was just orange groves and a field, no fencing. You could just walk on, and it was on a weekend. I think it was like a Saturday, and I took him out there. He was just like 3 or 4 months old. It's so beautiful. And I remember throwing the ball, and the sprinklers came on, and through the sprinklers, all you could see was just rainbows. The sun shooting through all the water from the sprinklers. It was just rainbows everywhere. And I saw how happy he was. He got just bringing it back, and he'd just, drop it off, and I'd throw it again, and he'd go after it, and he was just so happy and so young. It was this moment that I just knew I could feel God's love. This is treasure in heaven. This is something that God will never forget. We're aware of its value. Sometimes we're not, but sometimes we are. And this is an example of treasure in heaven. I had a number of memories like this. Because what was going on there was not only could I feel God's love, but I had a love for God. I waited those 4 years, those dark years, and I just kept waking up, and I stayed alive. And I waited, and I waited, and I endured. And finally, the time of mourning was over. And the time for a new life and for joy had begun. And I saw I felt the promise through those rainbows. And that moment was a treasure in heaven. I had a number of moments, not so as important to me as that one, but a number of moments over the years with my dogs that were like that. And there was one even about 3 or 4 months before Jenna and Faith passed, and a number of them actually, and they were treasure in heaven. Moments I had with my mom. some of the last discussions we had in the last 6 months of her life. Treasure in heaven. Anything that God has value for is a treasure. And God lives in heaven, and He keeps it, that treasure, in heaven. So when people ask, why are we here? We're not here to convert people. I'm just saying that because I can't stand that converting people. Like, we are here to love God and to love our neighbor as ourselves. That's why we're here. And if you live like that and you followed those commands that Jesus gave us, I'm convinced you wouldn't have to convert anybody, because people would willingly change their mind. Convert always, to me, feels like brute force. Like you have beaten them in argument and now they must surrender and accept that you have the stronger argument and therefore your belief system is more valid. Conversion always just kind of reminds me of that. But what I'm talking about is something different. I'm talking about moving people to a change of heart out of free will. Having them feel the love of God for the first time in their life if they've never felt it. And for the first time in their life, being able to love God. Like I described that time with Toby. Toby's name means God is good. Tobiah. T-O-B-I was short for T-O-B-I-A-H. And when I saw that name in Hebrew, that it means God is good, I felt like this has to be his name. Little did I know that it was his whole life that I was learning and understanding that lesson, that one simple lesson that God is good. Even if you don't understand it at the time, why things are happening, just know that behind it all, God is good. 4 years ago, my little dog drank this water in the pond and died from something that it was a 1 in a million chance of dying from. I never got mad at God. I was just frustrated with having to be in this world. And I remember back then even saying, just like when my mom passed, I have to be patient. And it's been 4 years, I have to be patient. I have to be patient because there's a reason. And today, 4 years later, I know now. And I don't even know what's ahead of me out here. It could be a total bust. I could sit out here in this house and never meet a soul and go nowhere but now I'm motivated to make something happen, right? But all I'm saying is I don't even know what's ahead of me. But I do know that their passing was for a reason, and not only how they passed, but when and where. Toby was out here with me for 2 days before he passed. Actually, technically it was 2.5, almost 3. I think we got out here on a Thursday. It was a Thursday night, I think, and then Friday morning he was kind of okay, but Saturday morning he was not. And that's when I knew I had to make the decision. I instantly went from trying to keep him around as long as I can with as least pain as I can to trying to have him put down as fast as possible because I don't think he's going to make it to the end of the day. And I'm trying to spare him from the worst hours of his life. My best friend of 16 years, who was with me through the hardest time of my life. All those winters, those 11 years of winter out in Kentucky with a little space heater. And then when I lost faith in Jenna, he was the only one who was with me. I had no friends out there. I had no family out there. For 3.5 years, Toby was with me. Okay? And I don't think that was an accident or a coincidence. That this dog, who He was so much like me. It was crazy. The other two were nothing like me at all. Jenna was a total opposite for me, but Toby was so much like me in every way. I've talked about this in past recordings. Don't want to get into it, but he was even his upbringing was like me. I got to understand myself from God's perspective, having him in my life, teaching me the lesson of how much God loves me, and that I will never know, as long as I'm in this world, I will never know how much God loves me until I leave this world. When Toby was about to be put down and they just had him sedated, I remember some of the last words I told him was, "You will never know how much I loved you." But I was wrong, because I realized when he passed and he's in heaven, he knew. That was when he finally knew. And so that lesson I learned about myself was that while I'm in this world finds ways to block you off from feeling God's love and distracting you. But when you leave this world, you will know God's love for you. And so I stare at the picture of this pond, and I don't stare at it hatefully anymore, or sadness, or anger. I look at this pond, and I see providence, and I see masterful design. I was taught a powerful lesson the last 16 and the last 11 years. We came, we had our senses, we saw, we felt, we experienced things. Each of us, we came to different conclusions and beliefs, but some of us saw the craftsmanship behind it. Toby was a very beautiful spirit. All of my dogs were, but Toby was just, he was not like most dogs. And I thought, if Toby was so beautiful, how much more beautiful is the mind that conceived him? And not only just conceived him, but brought us together. At a time in my life that was the most meaningful time, when I needed him the most. He could have been in my life when I could have met him, Toby, 2 years before my mom passed. I could have met him. He came into my life after I went through that period of mourning after losing my mom, and it was the beginning of the next chapter. So it was not just the fact that Toby was a beautiful spirit that God created, but how he used it. For me, this is beyond coincidence. It's purpose. A masterfully designed existence on ways that most people in the world aren't even aware of. So I give glory to the creator of Toby, to the creator of my mom, to the creator of my sister who helped me in this journey and put me into a home. And really, her and her husband, they kept me from offing myself. I don't know if they'll ever know that if I had to go back to that trailer in Kentucky without Toby, I would have left this world. And so they may have just thought I was really sad and helping me get through a hard time. I don't think they realized they helped save a life. And they helped me start a new one. And God created people like that. He created dogs like Toby. He created siblings like my sister. He created my mom. He creates these beautiful things. And I have to give credit where credit is due, and I have to give glory to the creator of all beautiful things. God is the God of life and love. He's not the God of death. That's the reason why Jesus said that in heaven there is no sickness, suffering, crying, or pain. When you pass through this existence, God does not remember any awful thing. any sin, any terrible thing, it's all forgotten. It melts away. The treasure in heaven remains. So I implore you to go into this life thinking about what I've said and building treasure in heaven. Finding ways to appreciate God, to love God, to see God's masterful work, and to love others. And not just people, dogs, others, other life. As Jesus even said, that God cares for the sparrows, so how much more does He care for you? That He cares for the sparrows. Life. Jesus said, I came so that they would have life and have it to the fullest. Jesus says His Father is the God of the living, not the dead. Treasure in heaven. All these moments are not lost like tears in the rain, as a rebuttal to that quote in Blade Runner. They are not lost. The whole purpose of this existence is to harvest these moments that I described, like with Toby and the rainbows. It was to harvest those moments, that joy. That's what He creates infinitely. We played a part in that process. Well, some more than others. Let's be real. I look back on my time with my dogs and I am satisfied. I'm satisfied overall with how it went. Yeah, I was young. I made a lot of stupid life choices and so on, but I'm talking about the things that really mattered. And for as little that I had, I was given no social life. I was given 3 dogs and a trailer out in the forest. That's what I was given. It was a very little bit, but with the little that I had, and $300 a month, I was working different jobs like at the pet store and stuff like that, and I was making about $300 or $400 a month. And it was like that for most of the time I was out there. And with the little that I was given, I was able to harvest treasure. Or not harvest, but grow. And God harvested. I'm happy with the time that I had with dogs. I loved them. And that kept me doing the right things. It breaks my heart when I hear people just give away their dog or just treat their dog like trash or a liability or something like that. I can't. I do not understand that. No. It is like a betrayal on a level I could never live with. And I know there's people out there that do that, and it's awful. There's a darkness in them. A real emptiness in them. Most dogs are like little angels with fur, and to mistreat such a beautiful thing is just, to me, I can't imagine it. And so, yeah, I'm happy with the last 16 years with my dogs, how it went. I navigated it all. I did everything I could for them. I tried, everything they ever needed. I fed them well. Everything they ever had. Too much, actually. I fed them too much. I looked at their pictures. I was like, they were all fat. Toby was so overweight from his middle age to like about the age of 15. He was so thick. But no, I always made sure they were fed, and even though it was sometimes beyond my means and I had to go into debt, making sure that if they needed medical help that they got it. I gave everything, like a parent would give to a child. I did everything I could for them, and I spent lots of time with them, and sometimes just one-on-one with them too, not just as a group. But there were times I took Jenna into town. She loved going in. I did not like going into town, but she loved it. She loved seeing all the people and wanted to say hi to everybody. She was just this super affectionate dog that she'll kiss everybody. And Toby just ignored people. He was like me. He just kind of just stuck next to me, and he didn't really ever say hi. He never said hi to anybody. He just kind of looked at you like, what? But Jenna she had to say hi to everybody, and she loved it when we went to town. So there were times like during Halloween or just different times, I took just her and me into town. I left the other 2 back at the house. I took her and me, and it was just her and me time. And there were other times Toby liked going more into the woods, and so that was just me and Toby kind of thing. And I took Toby out into the woods, and we'd go, on trail walks and stuff like that. And it was just him and me. This was in the days before I did recordings or anything like that. And it was just him and me. It was him and me, and it was him, me, and God. And I didn't realize that, how much. And so that was my one-on-one time with Toby. And it was my little dog Faith, who you couldn't take on a car ride anywhere, and she wasn't very social with other dogs. And what I do with her, after I did yard work, I chased her around the yard because she absolutely enjoyed that. She loved when I chased her around the yard. So that was my time with her, just her and me, so to speak. And plus I forgot throwing the ball for Toby too. Yeah, that was a him and me thing too. But I had one-on-one time with each of them, and as well as group time a lot of times, like in the house. But I don't regret much of anything. I mean, someone said, you don't regret taking her to that pond water that she drank and died? The other two dogs drank the water and they were fine. It was a 1 in a million thing. And I was just trying to do something nice for all of them. The weather was getting nicer after a cold winter. It was nice, and I just thought, hey, let's go on some together without any leashes. That was new too. No leashes. No leashes, just walking out in the woods on trails. What is this? And they loved it. They absolutely loved it. So I was just trying to do something that they would enjoy, that I would enjoy with them, and I don't regret. My motivation was clean. It's just unfortunate, the pain that was felt from it. But like I said, it was meant to happen. It was meant to happen. It's almost exhausting thinking about how masterfully designed the sequence of events in this life can be. That's it for today. Treasure in heaven. That's why we're here. Until next time.